Welcome back to our channel. Do you have a penny from 1976, 1985, or 2008? These Lincoln cents might seem ordinary, but hidden mint errors, double dies, and rare varieties could make them worth way more than a single cent. Like and subscribe now to find out if your penny is secretly valuable. The year 1976 was a moment of reflection in American history. As the nation celebrated its bicentennial, parades filled the streets, flags waved from every porch, and a renewed sense of patriotism echoed from coast to coast. In the world of coinage, special commemorative designs graced quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins, each proudly marked with the dual date 1776 to 1976. But the Lincoln cent, the modest penny that had quietly circulated since 1909, remained unchanged. No redesign. No fanfare. It remained exactly as it had for decades, Abraham Lincoln's solemn profile on the obverse, the Lincoln Memorial anchoring the reverse. And yet, despite its ordinary appearance and lack of a commemorative update, a small handful of 1976 Lincoln cents would go on to become some of the most mysterious and valuable errors in U.S. numismatic history. It began unnoticed. Minting of the 1976 penny was business as usual. Billions were produced between the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Most were struck on standard copper alloy planchets, 95% copper, 5% zinc, each weighing 3.11 grams. There was nothing in the official records to suggest any production anomalies. No press releases. No emergency die replacements. No changes in metal composition. And yet, deep within this ocean of uniformity, a few coins emerged carrying quiet flaws. Flaws so subtle and so improbable that they would go unrecognized for decades. The first to be discovered came from an estate sale in rural Kentucky in 2003. A longtime collector's private hoard had been auctioned off in lots of assorted pennies, most assumed to be common copper pieces with little more than sentimental value. But one coin, buried deep in a jar of circulated cents, looked off. Its surface shimmered differently under the light, duller, almost satiny. It felt slightly thinner in the fingers, and when tapped against a tabletop, it rang with a higher pitch. The collector who purchased the lot didn't recognize it as valuable right away. He tossed it into a side box for later review. It wasn't until months later, during a cleaning session, that he picked it up again. Something made him pause. The edge of the coin was slightly warped. The date, 1976, was clearly visible, but the Liberty inscription looked faint, almost ghostly. He placed the coin under a digital scale and was surprised to see the reading, 2.5 grams. Nearly a full gram lighter than it should have been. He sent it to an expert for verification. The verdict came back both unexpected and unprecedented. The coin had been struck not on a regular copper planchet, but on a planchet meant for an aluminum test strike, a type of planchet not officially in use during 1976, and long since believed to be destroyed or repurposed after failed experiments in earlier years. The surface confirmed the anomaly. The dull tone. The lightweight core. The distinctive sound. It wasn't just a rare error. It was something far more, an accidental survivor of a material phase that should never have made it to production. The coin was encapsulated, labeled as an off-metal error, and quietly became the subject of hushed conversation among collectors. No formal announcements were made. No public sales. The coin vanished into a private collection, but its story had already ignited curiosity. If one aluminum-based 1976 penny existed, were there others? Over the next 5 years, 3 more surfaced, each bearing different anomalies, but all tied to the same year. One bore an off-center strike so severe that half of Lincoln's face was missing. Another had been double-struck, the second impact rotating the design off its intended alignment, resulting in a shadowed overlap of letters and features. A third showed a strong brockage imprint on the reverse, Lincoln's profile pressed in reverse where the memorial should have stood. None of these coins bore mint marks, placing them at the Philadelphia Mint. This only deepened the mystery. The Philadelphia Mint had produced more than 4 billion Lincoln cents in 1976. How could any errors of this magnitude have gone unnoticed? The answer, as with many rare errors, was likely rooted in timing. Most of the flawed planchets and misstruck coins were believed to have escaped during brief production windows, likely during shift changes or mechanical calibrations. Perhaps the bicentennial frenzy had drawn attention to other denominations, allowing these pennies to slip quietly through the cracks. In 2012, a collector in Minnesota made headlines in certain numismatic circles when his 1976 penny was found to have been struck on a planchet intended for a dime. The coin, slightly smaller in diameter, bore all the details of a normal penny but with clipped edges and a weight significantly below standard. It was graded MS-63 and described as one of the cleanest dime planchet errors for the Lincoln series ever discovered. That same year, another specimen, this time struck on a thin, foil-like planchet with laminations peeling across the obverse, was auctioned quietly for $28,000. Each new discovery added fuel to a growing fire. Collectors began scouring penny rolls, checking weights, examining edges, hunting for anything in the 1976 series that felt wrong or looked unusual. Coin shops received a surge in requests. Online forums buzzed with comparisons and unconfirmed reports. And gradually, the 1976 Lincoln cent took on a new identity, not as a common coin, but as a potential treasure hiding in plain sight. Then came the discovery that redefined the series entirely. In 2021, a woman in Arizona sorting through her late father's coin collection discovered a penny unlike any she'd ever seen. It bore the correct date, 1976, but appeared silver in color. At first, she believed it to be a novelty item. A novelty penny coated with nickel, perhaps. But it felt lighter in her hand. She took it to a local dealer, who recognized immediately that it was something rare. Tests confirmed it was struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin, possibly one of the experimental blanks used for international minting contracts during the 1970s. Further analysis revealed an unexpected twist. The reverse bore a faint doubling across the words, United States of America, likely the result of a misaligned die striking an improperly seated planchet. The coin was authenticated, encapsulated, and later sold through a private auction house to a seasoned error coin collector. The final price, $130,000. That sale cemented the 1976 error penny's place in modern numismatic history. It was no longer just a curiosity, it was a chase. And the chase was on. Today, the number of verified major error 1976 Lincoln cents remains exceptionally low. Only a handful have been authenticated and publicly traded. The types of errors vary, from off-metal strikes and brockage to double strikes, off-center errors, and foreign planchet mismatches. Each carries its own degree of rarity, and none have been duplicated exactly. That uniqueness adds value beyond the physical metal. Each coin is a singular artifact, a chapter of a story that defies standardization. Depending on its condition and type of error, a rare 1976 Lincoln penny now commands prices ranging from $54,000 to as high as $130,000. It is a coin that was never meant to be rare. Never meant to be valuable. It was supposed to be just another penny. But a quiet mistake at the heart of the mint turned it into something else entirely, and somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten piggy bank, a dusty drawer, or a mason jar hidden in a garage, another one waits. A copper-colored clue to a silent minting anomaly. A coin not worth 1 cent, but something far, far more. In 1985, the Lincoln cent had been a staple of American currency for over 75 years. It had already seen multiple changes over the decades, shifts in composition, minor design tweaks, and the transition from wheat stalks to the Lincoln Memorial on its reverse. But by the mid-1980s, the penny was something most Americans overlooked. Tossed into pockets, dropped in change jars, forgotten between couch cushions. Its value was purely functional, 1 cent. But within the billions minted that year, a small and nearly invisible error occurred. An error that would remain undiscovered for years, and when finally found, would shock collectors and redefine the legacy of the 1985 U.S. 1 cent coin. The Philadelphia and Denver mints struck over 10 billion pennies that year combined. The sheer volume made it nearly impossible for an error coin to stand out. Quality control systems were refined and efficient by 1985. Even slight die cracks or misalignments were typically caught and removed before circulation. But no system is perfect. In fact, perfection often masks the most astonishing mistakes. It began with a young collector in Ohio, decades after the coins were minted. He inherited a few boxes of unsorted coins from his grandfather, a former bank teller with a habit of setting aside what he called odd pennies. Most of the coins were predictable, common issues from the 70s and 80s, worn and handled. But tucked into a small plastic sleeve at the bottom of the box was a coin that looked different. He couldn't explain why. It wasn't shiny or visually dramatic. But it had a texture and tone that felt off. He weighed it, 2.4 grams. A fraction below the expected 2.5 grams for the copper-plated zinc planchets used after 1982. At first, he thought the scale was off. He tested a handful of other pennies, 2.5 grams, 2.51, 2.48. But this one refused to match. Then came a closer look. The coin's edges were softly rounded, but the rim appeared thicker on one side than the other. Under magnification, the portrait of Lincoln had subtle doubling along the jawline. Even the "In God We Trust" inscription bore signs of shadowing. There was a ghost-like blur trailing several letters, not obvious to the casual eye but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. He submitted the coin to a grading service, hoping for clarification. The results stunned him. It was a double die obverse, an error caused when the die itself receives two misaligned impressions from the hub, creating a duplication of design elements. But that wasn't the most surprising part. The metal composition was inconsistent. The coin had been struck on a transitional planchet, either one that had not been properly processed or, more incredibly, a leftover from a previous year's experimental batch. How that planchet found its way into 1985's production line remains a mystery. But the discovery triggered a ripple effect. Other collectors began inspecting their 1985 cents more closely. Within 2 years, 5 more error coins from the same year emerged, each carrying its own story, its own flaw. One was struck on a foreign coin blank. It was slightly smaller than the standard penny and lacked a fully defined rim. The details were clear, but the fields appeared satin-like, lacking the usual luster of a freshly struck coin. Another example was an off-center strike, almost 15% of the design missing, with Lincoln's face drifting dangerously close to the coin's edge. That particular error, though aesthetically striking, wasn't especially rare, until they realized it had been double-struck as well. A second, slightly rotated impression had created a ghost image overlapping the first. In Florida, a coin dealer obtained a 1985 cent that appeared ordinary until closer inspection revealed that the reverse, normally bearing the Lincoln Memorial, was completely blank. The obverse was fully struck, clear and sharp, but the back was smooth as glass. It had been struck with a grease-filled die, a rare occurrence where residue in the minting equipment prevents the full design from transferring onto the coin. That coin, when sold privately, garnered intense attention from high-end collectors who had long dismissed the mid-80s pennies as mundane. The most captivating example came from Texas. A penny with severe lamination errors, a peeling of the outer copper layer revealing the zinc core beneath. It gave the coin a corroded, battle-worn appearance, like a relic pulled from time. But what made it extraordinary wasn't just the peeling. It had been struck through a fragment of metal from another coin, embedding a ghost impression of a Roosevelt dime onto its surface. This one-of-a-kind collision of two coins during striking resulted in a bizarre hybrid artifact, half penny, half dime, clearly unintentional, clearly unrepeated. All of these discoveries had one thing in common: their unpredictability. The 1985 cent was never designed to be rare. Never intended to be exceptional. It was minted in overwhelming numbers, with no design change, no commemorative mark, no new alloy. And yet, a perfect storm of mechanical flaws, misaligned dies, and overlooked planchets turned it into a source of hidden treasure. Collectors who had once ignored the 1985 cent began hoarding them. Entire rolls were picked through with jewelers' loupes. Digital scales became essential tools. Online forums lit up with speculation. What else had slipped through in 1985? Was there a pattern? A batch? A rogue employee swapping blanks? Or was it all chance, a string of unlikely errors that just happened to occur in the same year? The U.S. Mint offered no explanations. Their records from the mid-1980s were intact but unremarkable. No notes of missing planchets. No unexplained production spikes. No internal investigations. But the coins didn't lie. They were real, tangible proof that even in a world of automation and control, accidents, beautiful, valuable accidents, could still happen. In numismatic markets, the value of these errors began to rise steadily. At first, a few $100s. Then, a couple thousand for well-preserved examples. By 2015, one of the first discovered double-die errors, graded MS-65, sold for $31,000 in a private transaction. In 2018, the blank reverse specimen was auctioned for $46,500, shocking even seasoned dealers. And as each unique variant was discovered, collectors paid more, not just for rarity, but for story. These weren't just mint errors. They were chapters in a book the mint never meant to write. By 2022, the market for 1985 penny errors had matured into something far more serious. Top-tier grading services confirmed over a dozen major varieties, all dramatically different, all tied to that unassuming year. While not every 1985 penny is rare, the few that are command immense interest. Today, depending on condition, type of error, and provenance, these coins can fetch between $45,000 and $113,000. And still, more could be out there. Sitting unnoticed in basement jars, resting quietly in glove compartments, slipped into change machines, or resting beneath years of dust in a forgotten drawer. To most people, it's just a penny. But to a few? It might be the key to a discovery that rewrites the narrative of a seemingly ordinary year in American minting history. In 2008, the Lincoln cent quietly approached a milestone. The following year would mark the 200th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, a celebration that would soon bring dramatic design changes and renewed public interest in the penny. But in 2008 itself, there was no such fanfare. The Lincoln Memorial design still adorned the reverse, the familiar profile of Lincoln faced rightward on the obverse, and the United States Mint operated with routine efficiency, striking billions of cents across its facilities. Everything about the 2008 penny seemed typical. Predictable. Unremarkable. Until it wasn't. Some errors make their presence known with visual flair, off-center strikes, bold die cracks, or misaligned planchets. Others, however, are subtle, and their power lies in how easily they hide in plain sight. One such error emerged from a coin roll searcher in Colorado who'd been casually sorting pennies as a weekend hobby. It wasn't about money at first, it was the calming process of examining dates, mint marks, conditions. A break from noise. But that changed the moment he found one 2008 penny that simply felt off. The coin was brighter than the others. Not fresh, not proof-like, just unusually reflective. The luster clung to the fields differently, as though the metal didn't match the standard copper-plated zinc composition. He weighed it, 2.6 grams. A full tenth of a gram heavier than it should have been. He tested another handful, 2.5 grams, 2.49, 2.52. But this one stayed constant, slightly overweight. He turned to magnification. That's when he noticed something else. The date showed signs of doubling. Not the dramatic doubling that screams at you, but a refined, ghost-like repetition, particularly along the 2008, and most notably in the 8. The curve seemed to echo, as though the die had slipped, reset, and struck again. The phrase, "Liberty," appeared thicker, almost bloated. And the lettering of, "In God We Trust," displayed faint, yet definite, shadows. His fingers trembled as he picked it up again. It looked normal to the untrained eye, but every nuance hinted at something significant. He sent the coin to a third-party grader, cautiously optimistic. The results came back weeks later with an official designation, 2008 Lincoln cent, double die obverse, struck on an experimental bronze planchet. That last part set the collecting world ablaze. Bronze planchets hadn't been standard since 1982. For one to appear in 2008, a full 26 years later, defied explanation. The most likely theory? A leftover blank, misplaced or intentionally kept, somehow fed into modern equipment and struck with a 2008 die, but theories often invite more questions than answers. How had a bronze blank survived undetected for so long? Why was it struck at all? And if one had surfaced, were others out there? Word spread fast across online numismatic forums. Collectors began weighing their 2008 pennies in droves. Digital scales sold out in local shops. Every glint of bronze became a source of suspicion. A few false alarms trickled in, but then, another hit. This time from Arizona. The second coin displayed similar weight, identical doubling, and a curious surface texture, slightly matte, yet uncirculated. This triggered a domino effect. One by one, variations began appearing. Not all were bronze, and not all shared the same doubling. One was struck on a foreign coin blank, likely intended for a 2-cent coin from an overseas contract minting. Another showed a dramatic reverse misalignment. Lincoln's bust remained intact on the obverse, but the Lincoln Memorial had shifted drastically, almost sliding off the coin's edge. Another 2008 penny bore signs of die clash, with reverse features faintly imprinted on the obverse, like a ghost image pressed from the wrong side. And then there was the split planchet discovery in Minnesota. The coin had cracked across its centerline, not fully broken, but showing a visible hairline split that peeled slightly when pressure was applied. It had likely been struck on a defective planchet, one weakened during its production. Normally, such flaws were caught early. But this one survived the minting process and, somehow, decades of handling. What made the 2008 penny errors particularly captivating wasn't just the variety of mistakes. It was the timing. They came during the final year of the Lincoln Memorial reverse design. In 2009, the penny would shift to a series of commemorative reverses honoring Lincoln's life. The very next year, a permanent new reverse featuring the Union shield would take over. This placed the 2008 coin at a transitional pivot point, effectively the last of its kind. The U.S. Mint released no public statement. Internally, there was no documented admission of leftover blanks or unexplained errors. Their official stance remained tight-lipped. But collectors kept finding evidence. The number of certified 2008 penny errors reached 12 by the end of 2021, with likely more in private hands or lying undiscovered in drawers, jars, and change machines. A coin dealer in Illinois recounted receiving a 2008 penny in a bag of mixed coins from a gas station. He tossed it onto his inspection tray out of habit and nearly overlooked it. But the off-center strike caught his attention. As he lifted it with tweezers, the weight difference became apparent. It was bronze, doubled, and struck 10% off-center. An extremely rare combination of errors, especially in the modern minting era. One of the most intriguing finds came from a Pennsylvania collector who uncovered a 2008 cent with evidence of multiple strikes. The coin had clearly been struck at least twice, possibly 3 times, with each impression slightly rotated. The resulting image looked surreal, like 3 overlapping Lincolns frozen mid-movement, shadowed by multiple inscriptions. The value trajectory of these error coins followed a path of quiet escalation. At first, they traded hands among insiders, 4 figures here, 5 figures there. No headlines. Just whispered exchanges at coin shows and over private auctions. But once major grading companies started certifying them, attention surged. Collectors who had previously dismissed 2008 pennies as too recent to matter suddenly scrambled to re-evaluate their rolls. The market shifted. A double-die bronze planchet specimen graded MS-66 fetched $29,000 in 2019. By 2022, a similar coin in better condition went for $41,000 at an Arizona auction. The multi-strike specimen sold privately in early 2023 for a price believed to exceed $60,000, though the exact number was never confirmed. And when a matched pair, 2 bronze 2008s from separate states, were auctioned together, bidding surpassed expectations by tens of thousands. Today, the 2008 Lincoln penny holds an unusual place in numismatics. A coin from the edge of change. A coin from a year not marked by revolution or redesign, but one that quietly carried within it a string of rare anomalies. Not all 2008 pennies are valuable, of course. The vast majority remain worth only face value. But among them exist silent outliers, coins that defied the odds, bypassed detection, and became legends, depending on condition, certification, and uniqueness of the era. These rare 2008 1-cent pennies now command prices between $35,000 and $103,000. A reminder that even in the most ordinary of years, even in the smallest of denominations, the unexpected can emerge and change everything.